That's not a comic book. Now that's a comic book.
Hi, welcome to another episode of Trade Talk. As I mentioned, comic reviews this week. Crazy situation. Wasn't able to record live, but I'm doing it. It's late today. Sorry. Anyway, today we're talking about the Sandman Overture, so maybe it's proper that it's late, given that we were talking about the Lord of Dreams, and I'm, not going to bed at 8 o'clock, but hey. So, The Sandman is a series that I absolutely fell in love with. Some of the earliest episodes of Trade Talk are about different volumes of The Sandman. Neil Gaiman is a genius. That's all you have to say. When I heard that he was coming back to do one last story with Morpheus, with Dream, I was really, really excited, really interested to see what that would entail. But I didn't want to pick it up in single. I just cannot imagine reading Sandman in single issue because so much of it feels like it's such just a complete story in the craziest possible way, that I wouldn't want to read it in single. So I waited for the trade, and then by the time the trade came out and I actually got the trade, since I wanted the paperback, I just never got around to it. I've been doing comic reviews all the time, but I'm always reading other things. So I wanted to review this now. And I'm by no means disappointed, because I wasn't sure what to expect. But it wasn't exactly what I wanted it to be, and that actually makes a lot of sense. Hearing Gaiman talk about this, and hearing the way it's advertised, a tale 2 decades in the making, this was one of those things that was never published for a very specific reason. It was kind of sort of meant... It's the way the story takes place is everything that happens in these 6 issues happens before the third page of issue number 1. And the last page of this story is the first is like that page of issue number 1. And so it's all very, very intentionally structured. Or the last page of this story for Sandman, let me put it that way, is that page in issue number 1. That's where Morpheus' story ends, and then we get a brief epilogue. So everything takes place before that, and it's full of a lot of homages and tributes that you can tell were kind of like added in retrospect. Like they have Daniel here. But the reason that ultimately this never got told is because they didn't want to burden the reader with too much information up front. He didn't want to overcrowd you with too much of the lore and the craziness. He wanted to introduce that incrementally. So that's why this story was never told at the beginning of Sandman. And with Daniel just being the Sandman, it wouldn't have been proper to tell it at the end of Sandman, because that kind of would have stepped on Daniel's importance to the new and to the future of the character, as it were. So what this just is a story really without a place beyond just having more Sandman all these years later. So this is really well done. This is really good. This is really smart and clever, like everything else Sandman that Gaiman touched. But what I wanted as a Sandman fan is something much more emotional, much more literary, much more, engaging. And that's not... I felt that this was fascinating, and there was a moment where I was like, no! But I was not emotionally moved by this volume, which on some level does disappoint. There's really no getting around that. Like, you know, it's the last Sandman Gaiman's probably ever gonna write. As sad as that is to say, and it feels like when people use Sandman now, it's meant to break your heart. Like, all I can think about is the Paul Dini pitch to use Sandman that we got to read in Dark Knight, a True Batman story, and this just, it's not that. It's a story Gaiman had an idea for that's very interesting and would have been a cool arc if it had appeared in the original Sandman. And it's certainly neat to get it now, but it's not as I'd hoped it'd be. So that is what it is. But what is the story? Well, many years ago, when the first vortex in the dreaming appeared in the form of a human being, Morpheus did not have the heart to kill that person. And that person kept growing and growing, more out of order, pulling people into the dream, pulling their entire world into the dream. And so Morpheus, as his responsibility before it grew even bigger, he had to snuff out an entire world. But he didn't have the heart to do that, because it's killing an entire world. So instead he put it in a sun to contain it. But all that did was delay the problem, because now the sun has weighted and it is expanding, and the sun is a conscious entity, and this is Sandman. It's weird. The sun dreams itself, and so he put the planet that had collapsed into a vortex in the dreaming into the sun, and that had turned the sun into part of the vortex as well, and that was causing the entire universe to end. And so Dream has to find a way to save the universe, because literally what happens in this is planet after planet is dying out completely. But luckily, a cat version of Dream that has been traveling with him throughout is able to salvage enough souls, about 1,000 souls from across the universe, all these different species, and get them onto a ship of dreams so that they're able to ride out the end of the universe. And when there's almost nothing left, Dream tells a representative of the dead about this loophole that exists within his power. And it is a loophole that we saw explained but never truly utilized in an issue of the original Sandman. And that loophole is the kind of infamous cat dream story, where all the cats go and hear the story that cats used to rule the earth and humans were their prey, and the cats would eat them, and so on and so forth. But then one day all the humans had the same dream, that they were the dominant species, that the cats belonged to them, that humans controlled the whole earth. And because enough of them dreamed it at once, it happened. And so this story uses that power of the dreaming, which is a really interesting, really intrinsic metaphor. Again, I came off kind of at the beginning of this sounding like I didn't like it, which isn't true. I still really like this story, because that's a really fascinating implication now that we've got, like, you know, canonical proof that does work. It's not just a story, right? Which is kind of silly to talk about with Sandman. But you have the notion that all it takes is for a dream to catch on, and it can change the world. It can change the universe. And Gaiman literalizes that here. It literally saves the universe. That people dream that the universe was as it was, with only one difference, that a single star never existed. And that's a really, really, really cool idea. I really like this story, and Dream's able to save the world in that way, and the other, neat thing that this gives us, that I'm not sure if it was added, it's hard to tell how much of this is just the original pitch, and how much of it is some kind of attempt to retroactively go back and add to the pitch. Because this could have been the first story arc. You could have seen the cosmic, unbelievable power of Dream, and then seen him immediately humbled and brought down, and then have to go through his character arc to regain his power, his status. But there are things about this that seem like they're entirely there, probably because Neil Gaiman's gotten a lot of questions over the years that he doesn't have answers for. John Green wrote his book, The Fault in Our Stars, and in that it's about two teenagers who are obsessed with this one book, and this novel ends in the middle of a... And they want to know everything that happens after that sentence. They want to know what happens to these characters, what went on in this book. The story drops, and the story drops for a literary and important reason, that the main character died, or they got too sick to keep writing and stuff like that. But they're attached to these other characters, and they want to know what happened to these characters. And so they go and confront the author, and the answer they get is nothing. They're made up. Nothing happened to them. These characters aren't real. They're metaphors. And that's certainly a very good point about literature. What happens to Odysseus once he's back home? Nothing. He didn't exist, most likely. What happens to Hamlet's kingdom after he dies and is under the rule of... I can't remember the name. I think it's the King of Denmark. I don't remember. You are, as a person, you empathize with fictional characters, and you want to know more about what happens to them when your stories are over. This is how serialized characters in comic books exist. Famous, like right now, as I record this, new issue of DC Metal, this big crossover Scott Snyder's doing, is coming out, and who's showing up in it but Daniel Sandman. So you want to know what happens to a character. And so I guarantee you that Neil Gaiman, over the years, has gotten all kinds of questions from fans, because we've introduced all these other members of his family, his brothers and sisters. But what about his mom and dad? And in this, you meet his mother and father, or Dream meets with his mother and father, and we get to see what they are, because his sister is Death, his older brother is Destiny, his younger sister is Despair, his sister brother is Desire, his youngest sister is Delirium, his middle brother is Destruction, right? Is it Destruction? Yeah, I think so. But what about their parents? And that's really fascinating. I haven't talked much about the art, but I gotta talk about the just amazing art in this scene where Dream meets his father, because it is by far one of the trippiest fucking things I think I've ever seen. I don't have my typical setup here, so it's actually kind of hard to see what's going on. So you open the page, and all this book, J.H. Williams III does all the art in this, the pencils, and Dave Stewart does the colors. So all this book is just a lot of crazy pouring over every panel detail. But I like this page because it opens with what looks like is going to be a traditional panel layout, which is really surprising since none of this book has been very panel driven. A lot of the art in this book has been incredibly expansive and doesn't do a lot with panels. It's a lot of like big sweeping spreads. But we open, and then as this weirdness kind of bleeds away, we start to lose panels in their traditional sense as we meet with his father, who is time. And his father keeps aging and changing ages out of sequence. So at one point he's like kind of a young man, or a middle-aged man with long hair, then he's a young man with short hair, then he's a boy, then he's an old man, and it's just really, really fascinating to see how all that works together, and I really, really like that. So Dream's father is time, and his mother is darkness. His mother just is the void. I am a child of time and night, and this place will prove my end. He gets at one point thrown into a black hole, and then gets to meet with his mother, and his mother just is the void. She is the abyss. She is nothingness. She is the night sky. And not the stars. She has stars within her. She is not the stars. She is the space. And that's really, really fascinating. Kant, I'm going to talk about Kant. Why the fuck am I talking about Kant? Well, I'm talking about a beautiful book. Why would I bring up fucking Kant? Kant, in his attempt... I should do a clap. I've been talking for a bit. Kant, in his attempt to bridge these two branches of philosophy, rationalism and empiricism, developed a theory. So, really, really quick philosophy lesson. Rationalism is about the idea that we are born with certain innate, intrinsic ideas. We just know things because we know them. Things are intrinsic to us. Empiricism is the idea that everything is based on our experiences. Everything is based on things we sense with our face holes and our feeler things, and everything we know is because of what we experience. And so it's this idea of like, is there knowledge that comes a priori that you just know, or is all knowledge a posteriori, things that you know through experiencing them? And so there's these huge debates in philosophy for a couple hundred years about what that, like, which one is it? And so you got like famous philosophers like Descartes who argue for rationalism, and you got other philosophers like Hume who argue for empiricism, and this debate rages on for hundreds of years until you get to Kant. And Kant, for a time, attempts to bridge the gap and succeeds quite well for a time between these two branches. So Kant takes the position that most knowledge, almost all knowledge, is based on experience. But in order to have those experiences, you are still intrinsically aware of two things. You still have two intrinsic ideas that you do not experience, at least not in the same way that you experience everything else. And that is time and space. So Dream and his siblings are the endless. And their parents are the two things that every being in the universe has to experience, according to Kant. Time and space. And, for everyone arguing, no, you still experience space. Yeah, sure, I experience space. Okay, so here's a chair, and here's a book, and here's some space. No, you don't experience space. You just take it for granted. And you don't experience time. You just are dealing with it. You don't like going, okay, there's a time, and then there's some time, and then there's some more time. It's just something that happens. You have to be made aware of it before you start to think about it. So I really like the idea that Dream's parents are time and space, because that is so perfectly succinct to these ideas that these are the endless. There will always be death. There will always be time. There will always be space. As long as there are creatures, there will be dreams. As long as there are creatures, there will always be destruction. There will always be destiny. There will always be delirium. There will always be despair. There will always be desire. It's a beautiful idea. And the way that J.H. Williams visualizes that in that scene with Dream talking to his father of time just going in and out non-linearly, of time being aware of the past, present, and future simultaneously, because he is. That's really fascinating. I really like it. It's cool. Good stuff. Again, J.H. Williams III and Dave Stewart do just an incredible job. Every spread on this book is fucking beautiful. Like every panel and everything just happens, and it looks amazing. I can just show you random pages from this book, and it is absolutely jaw-droppingly beautiful. The way they set up panels, like they're talking about the ruby here, and you see panels as parts of the Dream Ruby. It's so great. I love the character designs. I love the different styles of art used for this. It's really cool to see painting, digital, drawing by hand, drawing by machine, all kind of integrated at once. This bridge is so cool. J.H. Williams III frickin' kills it on this book. And the points that are made about the power of dreams is absolutely fascinating and incredibly beautiful and breathtaking, and I just love it for that. Dave McKean came back to do the covers, and I actually really like Dave McKean. I know a lot of comic fans can't stand Dave McKean for his non-traditional style, especially since he doesn't like to help guide you through a page when he does his art, and he doesn't like to make everything obvious when he does his covers, but man, he does a great job. You can hang Dave McKean's artwork up in a fucking gallery. You take the titles off the cover, and these are some of the most gorgeous images you'll ever see. Yeah, Dave McKean. You know, you can buy a coffee table book of just the covers for Sandman by Dave McKean. It's awesome. The City of Light is really fascinating too, because they go to they go to meet the stars, and the stars have a city, and it's a city made of lights, and it's just so freaking cool. The lighting's not good on this angle that I got set up here, so it's kind of hard to see everything that's going on, but it's just really, really gorgeous, and man, I love this. Oh, we also get some neat stuff that I thought was kind of cool. No. There we go. Maybe. No, that's just the... You think it would be easier to find these. So this is something you rarely see done in trade, and I was very, very pleased and surprised and happy that they went for it. Okay, here it is. It's got to be it, right? So we get all these black pages, one right after the other, as the universe is over. And then we get a page turn, and it's 2 more black pages. But they gave us a fold-out of Dream restarting the universe. And there are like 2 or 3 of these in this book. And that's really cool to see done in trade. They never do that in trade. I love it. It's really, really unique. It's a very particular piece used in comics that you don't get to see a lot, because it's more expensive, it's harder to do, and it's harder to bind books like that in trade than it is in single issues. So it's really like a special thing that a lot of times editorials just won't give you, and you really have to have the thing to earn that little trick. And it's great to see that they got to do it here in Sandman. Also a good reason to own this in trade or single issue, as opposed to waiting for another big collection. Like I've got the Absolute editions of Sandman. You can't do that in an Absolute because you just can't fold out the page enough. But it's really cool to have it here where I can actually, do that. I can open it up enough to do that without damaging the book. I don't have a ton else to say about this. Again, it's a really fascinating, really interesting, and clever read. I'm going to take the time to go through and read some more of the interviews. They got like a little interview with J.H. Williams III in the back. I'm not sure if it's only him, or if they talked to maybe Dave Stewart. Yeah, they show some of the work that Dave Stewart does too, which is neat. So I'll have to go through and check that out. Letters by Todd Klein, so he goes through some of the processes he did with the lettering. Constructing the covers by Dave McKean too. So you get a lot with this trade, even though it's only the paperback version. I wonder what the hardcover was like. Anyway, I think that'll do it for this episode of Trade Talk, everyone. I hope you enjoyed. I highly recommend this, just like I recommend everything Sandman. And as I always say, what the fuck are you doing watching this if you haven't read all of Sandman? Quit right now. I am not even worth pausing the video for. Just close your browser, go out to a store and buy all of Sandman, and start reading it right now. Bye.
That's not a comic book. Now that's a comic book.